Hello, I'm Neysa Page-Lieberman. I am the co-founder and artistic director of Monuments to Movements with my colleague Jane Sachs. Welcome to our highlights reel for SpeakEasy Season 2. SpeakEasy is M2M's public conversation series where we discuss our current initiatives and related ideas with our collaborators. We kicked off Season 1 in January 2022 and just wrapped Season 2 in May of 2023. If this is your introduction to Monuments to Movements, welcome. M2M is an international organization that envisions, develops, and commissions public artwork that monumentalizes movement making and collective action. Our team includes Marcela Andrade, Kelsey Bogdan, Josué Esau, and Aarya Malik, and an expansive international group of movement builders. M2M offers a new vision and an evolving process that is not just inclusive of the world's diversity, but also paradigm shifting, feminist, and centered in restorative justice. We're working on monuments about climate justice, evolving democracies, indigenous rights, feminist seed banks, and much more. We commissioned the Deeper Story essay series, which now has over a dozen new essays and is soon to become a book. And we've created the first ever archive of public art about movement building. SpeakEasy is one of our most popular initiatives, and you won't wonder why when you see the brilliant artists, scholars, activists, and creative collaborators who have joined us in conversations about public art and collective action. This highlights reel includes just a taste of each program so you can decide which conversations you really want to dive into and watch in full. It might be all of them. I suspect this. Each SpeakEasy episode is tied to a current project, and these episode titles include Reproductive Rights and Public Art, Artists and Politics, Feminist Seed Bank, Movement Makers, and the Play as Monument. And you can learn more about each one of these projects on our website at monumentstomovements.org. Each SpeakEasy season is organized into a playlist on our YouTube channel, and Season 3 will be back in September with new episodes loading immediately after we air them. We hope you will sign up to our newsletter so you never miss a thing, and follow us on Instagram, where we share all the big news and post all the opportunities to get involved. We also hope that you consider making a donation to our work. If you like what you've seen and you love that we make all of our programs free and open to everyone, please consider supporting us with a donation. Every dollar counts. All links to everything that I have talked about so far are in the program notes below. We thank you for watching today, and we thank you for spreading the word about Monuments to Movements and the SpeakEasy Conversation series to everyone you know. We appreciate you. On to the show.
Through my work with For Freedoms, especially Hank Willis Thomas, and now the Wide Awakes. One thing we really strive for, and has really been inspirational, and I really believe in, like I mentioned before, is civic joy and radical love and coming together. I have a piece called Love is Activism. And if we can come together in love, and I'm seeing that grow. The first little march I did, which was rather impromptu, and we laughed, and I thought, is this okay? Is that okay for us to do in a political, or protesting and speaking up for abortion rights? Is that okay? And I realized we need that laughter, and again, that's hope. We all need hope, especially these days. And it creates hope and community. And it's really about building on that community and building on love. And I truly, truly believe in that.
I always think of Harriet Tubman. She is my inspiration, because I always say that she didn't have the clothing that I have. She didn't have the transportation that I have, but yet she went out there and she did it to bring her family and other people. She didn't have the luxuries that I had, and if she was able to go back 5 times or 7 times, what is my excuse? So that's my armor, that if Harriet Tubman could do it in the situation that she was in, not having proper clothing, not having proper shoes, not having proper, the fancy technology that we have in socks and jackets and all this stuff. If she can do it, I can do it. So my armor is just that I have this sense of obligation. These people sacrifice for me to be able to have the life that I live right now. So I feel that I should be there for other people who don't have the opportunity to be out there, and that's it for me.
I definitely think what I envision is that we use this not only as a form, when we think about public art, to break through and get people into a space or into action, but also a source of healing. I'd love to see more places where people could restore themselves, because this just takes a lot out of you, whether like you, Nadine, who is incredible and quite inspirational, by the way, an accidental activist who is doing so much, or someone that is like plugging along in different ways, whether you're art or activism, this is taking something from us. Every time we put something into the world, it could have the potential of depleting us. So to have these kinds of spaces where restorative things could happen to people, where you could heal, because this is a journey, and while we are creating and rebuilding, we're also being broken at the same time. This is what the story does to us, and we're getting it set up for our next generation. So I would love, if I think about my children, I want them to have places they can plug in. We go to the airport, you charge your phone. Can I please get charged? Can we please be ready and resilient and ready for the next set of fights that we have to jump into?
I love in general artists who, I mean, like Hank and the Guerrilla Girls, who are both doing the work in the field and producing and creating and doing hands-on work, but also building platforms and lifting up others. I think to me that's a really essential part of creating the world that you want to see.
You know, when the Guerrilla Girls started all those years ago, we loved the street. We loved seeing what was in the street. We liked all the crap that was posted and torn up, and, you know, the arguments in the street and everything. And that was our goal, to be part of that, and to put something to, not to have gatekeepers. You know, the art world is all about gatekeepers. You're important, you're not. And I think what all of us have done is go somewhere else. And it's not that we're not in museums, you know, galleries, whatever, but we're doing a whole new kind of work for any audience that wants to see it. You know, and I do think it's very important not to assume anything about people who are going to see it, which is why it's usually important to me to tell people something they didn't know before.
I'm holding on to a thread of truth that comes straight out of my heart, that existed before I existed. So that thread of truth that was in my ancestors, that what we call ancestral intelligence, and threading that into the lives of my descendants, not just the ones that come out of my loins, so to speak, but anyone and any human relative of mine to follow.
I think we think a lot about opening minds, and that's really including ours. You know, it's not like we're changing somebody else, right? And I always say our work has no end user. And, you know, it's not to land anywhere in particular as much as to just keep folding people and ideas and breaths in as we go forward.
So I think like I want to develop more the idea of plants that produce fruit, because have been an integral part of the woman in my family. I remember an aunt passing on ethnobotanical knowledge and Afro-Indigenous techniques to us. I remember her bringing me juice squeezed from fruit trees and telling me the story of how long these trees have sustained us, how the juice is prepared, and what benefit it has. I didn't understand the importance of that information at that time, but I accepted as a part of our connection. And now as an adult, I came to understand how those moments have been key in my practice of community activism and in my aesthetic, how much of that information is present in the work of Utopia and in the community-based projects in which I collaborate.
Talking about how all things are actually collaborative and embracing the fact that through collaboration, we can expand the meaning and the applications of what we do. So for me, a form of resilience is to not be only concerned with the practice that I do. It's to engage other people in other disciplines, to think creatively about how what I'm doing has adjacency and vice versa. And I think that that's what contributes to evolution of practice. I always go back to Kelly Church because she's the person who most recently has sort of exploded my mind around these topics of what will the world be like without the black ash tree, right? I think in climate crisis, we talk a lot about, you know, sort of the positive ideas of saving things and what can be saved, but accepting also that there will be things we cannot. And so resilience is also thinking about how collectively we can evolve practices to live through these times. I think that's a really important aspect of resilience.
I told about this dolls, Chikurchak, and actually we are losing them because of climate change, because this chi itself, now it's really hard to find it. And the second reason, we lost a lot of our traditions during Soviet time. It was 70 years, and we lost traditional knowledge, we lost techniques, actually we lost our identity. And now I'm just so happy. As I said, it's not popular anymore. Nobody makes these dolls, but somehow it has been saving in art among artists, women artists, and I before showed these dolls and art projects related to these dolls. Actually, I have old one here. I forgot to show it before, but they look like this, and this is the most important part. It's like background. I mean, here you can see this plant, and this doll is pretty old. I took it by one amazing woman, Gulmira, who is collecting these dolls, and I have two of them. You can hear this.
And for me, what kept me sane during my time in prison was learning, was seeking information out, reading, and trying to play with ideas in my head and try to act them out in the confines of a prison institution. So I knew how important that was. So when I was released, I created a print publication called News Inside that would be free of charge and free of the hassle all the hassle that I just explained for incarcerated people, and is distributed in over 1,000 prisons and jails in the US. And most recently, I created Inside Story, which is a video series for people in prisons and jails who may have some literacy issues or who would prefer to get their news from television as opposed to reading it. And it's very essential to incarcerated people's lives. For instance, there's stories that incarcerated people write themselves, and we pay them to write it, and then we actually animate it, and you might see it in a series.
When you think of movements, we oftentimes see them as being a global, or maybe being a a push that's supported by thousands of people. But oftentimes movements start hyper locally. They start with a very few local people that are stepping into their fear and breaking from the shame or the pain that they're feeling, and really become really vocal despite competing interests or despite whatever the status quo might want them to be. So when I think of movement, I think of that being a part of the movement as well. A movement can be large, but a movement can also be really small. And because we tend to see them only in periods of time, we don't realize that movements go from being just a few people, maybe even one person or two people, that eventually build together enough community, enough networks, enough support, and then create something that transcends times and generation.
So there's no guarantees, in a way, like a novel, how this is going to end, how the stories end. Just because you work on the right side, you need to have hope. You need to hope to win. You don't always win. And you got to recognize you pass the baton, in my case, to younger people, and just support them and make sure we also learn the history a bit of our movements.
So I think just in real time, you see how the power of art can really carry a message, can make people want to be part of a movement. It can speak to people in a way that's different than words, which can seem really sanitized or really academic or really clinical. So I think it plays a really core role, actually.
That storytelling and playmaking specifically are incredible ways of being inclusive of histories and stories that have been left out in the monuments and narratives that we pass along to the next generation here in the United States. I'm standing in front of a wall of photos of the life and legacy of Jean Hill Chowdhury, my mother-in-law, who was a Muskogee matriarch, a citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation. She was the first Native woman to receive a national award in the United States Supreme Court for her dedication to public service. But many people don't know her story. There are no monuments to her. There are no inclusions of her story in curriculum and K through 12 education. And quite honestly, until very recently, stories like hers were not told on the American stage, because until very recently, most American theaters had never produced a single play by a Native playwright, but had produced multiple plays using red face.
To do just a huge paradigm shift of all those beautiful productions, we can now invest that in Native stories. And so I hope from my work, I want to write those stories and be a part of crafting those stories, because those stories on those level is what's going to change. It's going to shift the spirit of this country and open people's hearts and minds to the very real issues that Native people face today and that we're trying to gain support for. We're trying to support sovereignty. We're trying to protect the Indian Child Welfare Act, and we need everybody to do that.
A play, for better or worse, is reflective of the community that is building it and reflective of the community around it. And the question is, what do you want to focus on? Because you can be exclusionary without even meaning to be, if you're not really fighting against it.
So much of the tradition that I come out of is rooted in ephemerality. And one of the most important aspects of it, and I think it's probably best experienced in the theory of jazz music, right? Where you are playing and composing at the same time, that the circumstances demand full presence, and that music on that night can only be made in that particular space with those particular people. So the monument, in a way, becomes the memory, the lived experience, the vibration that the people carried, experienced, and walked away with.